Lesson 6.1, Relations and Functions. So your goal in this lesson is to understand the concept of mathematical relations, relations and functions. Also, to understand how to represent them as mappings. All right, so basically what it gets down to is that there's these things called relations and functions, and they're just ways to classify different situations. All right, so let's start with the easier one. Relations. Take a look at this example. A relation is like a relationship. Okay, a relation is anything that pairs any input values with outputs. And I know that's a little vague, so here's some examples. So let's say you're doing some experiment and you pair the time running, so like elapsed time of a run, versus the distance covered. Now, the moment you link those two sets of numbers together, you've created a relation or a relationship. Okay, if I take the number of work hours and compare it to the amount of work produced, again, I've created a relation. If I take your shoe size and compare it to your IQ score, I've created a relation. Okay, so anywhere where I've paired input numbers with output numbers, that's considered a relation. Now, I specifically chose this last one because I'm hoping you're looking at it, kind of laughing at it, going, are you serious? Okay, because these first two kind of make sense. That time running, the more time you spend running, more than likely you're going to cover more distance. The more work hours you put in, more than likely the amount of that you're making will increase. But shoe size has nothing to do with IQ. Now, in this case, that doesn't matter because a relation is anywhere where I'm just comparing numbers. So that brings us to the concept of a function. Okay, now to go there, here's what I think is actually going to be easier. I'm going to show you what a function isn't. Okay, and you heard me right. I want to show you what functions are not because I think you'll actually understand it better this way. Okay, so basically a non-function would be a relation that doesn't work. Okay, and so, just like back here, this one I would consider a function. Time running versus distance covered. It makes sense. It works in the real world. It's functional. Work hours versus amount produced, that's, I think, a function. It makes sense. It's functional in the real world. But this one doesn't make sense. Your shoe size has nothing to do with your IQ score. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't function in the real world. Okay, so let's take a look at these relations that don't work first. And let's kind of understand the idea. Let's take a look at this one. Let's take a look at a typical time-distance graph. Across the bottom is the amount of time you've traveled, and here's the distance. Now, take a look at that. Now, this would not be considered a function. This doesn't work in the real world, but I want you to ask yourself why. What about it doesn't work in the real world? All right, now, if you're kind of looking at this section right here, you're zoned in on the right spot. Okay, let's do this. I'm going to bring this line over, and let's say I start sliding it across. This is my time indicator. And as I slide the time, you can see my distance increases, and then you hit right here. Right there is what we should be looking at because this doesn't make sense. Because it's saying at this point in time that I'm this far away, but I'm also this far away. That doesn't make sense in the real world. It's not functional. There's no way I can be at two places at the same moment in time. Okay, so this would not be considered a function. So I guess what I'm getting at is a function is something that works in the real world. Okay, so here's the textbook definition. A function is a relation that works, a relation where each input is paired with exactly one output. Okay, now the reason why they have this as the definition is exactly why I brought up this example. Here's a place where the input was this time. Let's say this is hour 8. And this one input spit out two different outputs, which doesn't make sense. And so that's why we have this definition. Okay, a relation where each input is paired with exactly one output, that's a function. All right, so take a look. Let's go with the table that goes with that graph. Here, this would be a function. Because as you can see here, each input number, 0, is paired with 0. 1 is paired with 15, 2 paired with 20, 3 paired with 60, 4 paired with 68. Okay, each input is paired with exactly one output, so it's considered a function. Okay, but this one is not a function, and this is the one that goes with the last graph, or at least close to it. Okay, 0 is paired with 0, 1 is paired with 15, but these ones I've outlined in red, here it's saying at hour 2, I'm 20 miles away, but at hour 2, the same exact time, I'm 60 miles away. That can't be possible, and so this is not a function. It's a relation because I paired the numbers, but it's not functional. It doesn't work.